Okay, so this is the what's new talk in the system. Alessandro gave what's new in the books. Jay is in Scotland. When Jay's ready to go to Scotland, Dad has to tell you what. So here's the status. Version 7.4 was released in March 2017, which was before the May 2017 workshop, so I'm not going to talk about that at all. Versions 8.0 and 8.1 are what were released after the workshop, so I'm going to talk about those. I'm not going to talk about the few things that have been added to that'll be in the next release. I just didn't do that. There are 80 release note items, so 80 documented things. That does not include even the things that were little tweaks that were mentioned in comments. So if you go into the book system documentation, book system doc, ACL2 doc.list, and look for defx doc note 80, you'll see Lisp comments with minor things. I'm not counting those. I'm just talking about if you go to the documentation, you'll see 80 distinct things here and 77 here. And of those, so I thought, well, what are those 77? And I broke them down here from, I say def label, I'm sorry, that should be defx doc. I'm still living in the past. So of those 77 breakdown, 32 of them are changes to existing features, and 25 of them are bug fixes. And only 8 are new features, and 6 are heuristic or efficiency improvements, and then there are a few at the system level and whatnot. So the point is, the system continues to mature, and as I think this was mentioned in another talk, as the system matures, more and more effort is going into just polishing it. But there are some new things, not a huge number, but some. So what am I going to talk about today? I want to just try to pick some things that are interesting. I'm not going to talk about boring bug fixes or stuff, but we want to pick out a few things of interest. So it'll be a little different from Alessandro's talk. This is not intended to be in any way comprehensive. I'm just going to pick out a few things that I think are more interesting than the others. I'm still not going to go into any detail because there are over 150 of them. So if you want to know more, just read the documentation. So that said, what I'm going to do now is switch over to the release note. So here's what Note 80 looks like in the documentation. So here's the first one, for example. So what's this? This is why I don't want to go into all of these, right? It's kind of boring. There's a macro case match, and now it treats keywords like, I did a keyword. Why doesn't the keyword work? Case match is...
Sweetie, nobody wants to hear about a tweak case match.
So... Those of you who are in Vienna know that Holly did the same thing to me there, barged in the middle of my talk, and started asking me a whole bunch of really hard questions, and I guess you're probably here to ask me some more hard questions. Nice shirt, though.
Thanks. Yes, because back in 2014, when we were in Vienna, I was still a social worker. But since then, I've retired, and I spend all my time studying ACL2. So anyway, my first question is, how about all those bugs?
Oh yeah, they're fixed.
Okay. Well,
next question.
Don't you think it's a bug, though, when someone can wreak unlimited havoc by using syscall during a proof?
Well, yeah, that's a little bit nasty, but as it turns out, it just so happens that several changes have been made to syscall and syscall plus, and there's even a new utility, syscall star. And these stem from Eric Smith made an observation that syscall could do some nasty stuff through the operating system during the middle of term simplification. So we fixed that, and I could go on and on and on, but there's all this stuff about various flavors of syscall. If you like to do that kind of thing, you might want to read that. And I'm sure you'll find it fascinating.
Okay, so we won't focus on bugs then. Well, except for, around the house it's always Emacs this and Emacs that. That's when you're not talking about food or lists. But I hate make event because of all the noisy output. Isn't that a bug you should fix?
Well,
The conversation's supposed to be fascinating.
So It's better, okay? It used to be that when you suppress, it's now the case when you suppress a lot of output, like all of it except error, then you get a lot better results when you're using make event. And you can read these things, but like when I wrote the defun T tool that I was just showing you, I think if I'd done this before, it would have been really noisy, and you don't like noise.
I don't. So you started your talk by bragging about cleaning up ACL2, and I guess that's an example. Maybe if you did some other cleaning, God knows you don't do any of that around the house. Like once you added a nice utility for formatted printing to strings, but I couldn't use it in DEF cons. How about now?
Now you can. Good question. I'm so glad you So, this may seem irrelevant, but it's not. We removed some support for infix printing, but because we did that, now we can, I don't even remember why, but that removed an obstacle that was preventing us from doing just that sort of thing. So now, look what you can do. Def const *c* FMS to string, and you can give a formatted string. There's a tilde directive, and 0 is bound to 2 to the 4th, and it'll work. So this is what you couldn't do before, and now you can. Look, you can thank Eric for that.
Thanks, Eric. So how about cleaning up the so-called higher order capabilities?
Oh God, you're on that
I
again?
am. That you told me about when I first complained in Vienna that ACL2 is first order.
Well, okay. There must be something. Oh, look. So there have been several related changes, and I'm not going to go into all these, but things have been improved. So for example, we have this magic EV fun call now, and it could actually subvert the protection that untouchables were supposed to give. But that hole's been plugged. And let's see, what else? Well, it was possible for EV fun call W to also subvert such a check because you could put it under program wrapper so guards weren't checked, blah, blah, blah. And that hole's been plugged. And then there's even a way to check guards dynamically in a certain sense. So anyhow, there's all sorts of progress on that. I think one of the more interesting things is that Oracle Apply and Oracle Fun Call have gone. There's just too much duplication. Magic EV Fun Call is really pretty nice. It's documented. And if you want to basically call a function, like kind of like apply a function in logic mode, the function, I remember if it has to be in logic mode. Read the documentation. Obviously, I did. Okay. You have some more questions? Rescue me here.
Yeah, I've been kind of hard on you, so I'll say something nice. I really like table events. Actually, I have no idea what that means. I did actually enjoy setting up the table for the reception on Sunday, but I wish I could refer to the enabled status of a function.
Yeah, you always say that. You can. So it used to be when you write a table event, you could say world, and that would be bound to the current world. Now you can also use ENS, and that's bound to the current enabled structure. So you can do things like, have a table guard that says only put this function symbol in if it's a currently enabled function symbol in the world. Isn't that great?
That is. It's great. Wasn't there something else you wanted to say about second order stuff?
Oh, yeah. So we've talked about apply dollar before. Jay gave a talk about it in the preceding workshop, and it was mentioned in Alessandro's talk. And to me, it almost feels like it's been there forever, but it's really a relatively new feature. It was introduced in version 8.0, and it's improved a lot since then. So if you tried it at the beginning and didn't like it, maybe try it now. In fact, there's quite a major change just in the last few weeks after the release of 8.1. So if you're using the GitHub version, you can now put guards on lambdas, for example, which is pretty cool. And the verified guards utility understands it and so on.
So there's been a lot of talk about civil discourse and politics, but I feel like ACL2 shouts at me all the time. How can I get lowercase?
Oh, you want lowercase, not just less output. Okay. Well, fortunately, and I'm sure I had you in mind when I did this, there is a new function, read object with case. to read things, sort of preserving the case. And then you can also print things preserving the case. So for example, if you want to print a symbol whose name is the lowercase string ABC, it'll actually, if you use print object preserving case, it'll print that symbol as ABC rather than as vertical bars ABC. So yeah, you can get lowercase output.
Oh, okay. Well, speaking of output, sometimes I want things to be quiet. I know that with output can control output at the event level, but can I control function? But can my functions control output?
Oh, yeah, sure, I know. You want that.
I do want that. That's so bad.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so we have with output banning. With output banning is just like with output, except for two things. One, it does not create an event, and two, you can use it in your code.
Wow.
Well, this is a bit out of the blue, but I can't go backwards all the time. What's new in going forward?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, so one of the heuristic improvements is in forward chaining. Come on, So, if you forward chain to a disjunction P or Q, and then forward chaining in that same computation later realizes that Q is false, it will actually be smart enough now to say, oh, well, P or Q is true and Q is false, then P must be true. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so I don't want to listen to you all the time. Where can I read about some of this cool stuff?
Well, I don't know, let me see. In the documentation. Okay, so actually we've made a bunch of documentation improvements. In fact, so just to give a couple examples, there's a topic called local incompatibility that I think is clearer now. And all these topics give thanks to various people. And if you read these, it's kind of the people in this room, so thank you all en masse. But anyhow, yeah, local incompatibility explains more about this business of when you certify a book and then you get an error because of the local incompatibility failure. There's a new topic called evaluation that, finally in one place explains executable counterpart function or *1* function, and explains the raw list function, which there I think is called the submitted function, and how they both come into play. So if you've always wondered about evaluation but felt it was too spread out through the documentation, you could take another look. Anyhow, we keep trying to make the documentation better.
And it just keeps expanding. But so do the community books. How can I find stuff? There's just so much.
Well, before we get to that, I also want to mention another documentation topic, talks. So you can. But anyhow, okay, sorry. Your question?
How do I find stuff about the book?
Oh, okay, already. All right. So this is giving them too much of a. So there's a tags table that's built automatically when you build the manual now. Tags ACL2 doc. Well, you can defeat it and blah blah blah. But the bottom line is this is a tags table. So if you're used to using tags, you can load this one. I never do that, but there are actually commands in ACL2 doc now. I haven't used them lately. I think it was / for one of them, but it's well documented. If you go to the topic ACL2 doc, you can actually hit a command in the ACL2 doc Emacs browser, and it will take you essentially with metadot to the actual function or theorem definition. So you can actually find stuff in the books from the documentation if you use ACL2 doc, which, of course you want to do that.
Well, I noticed that you're using this beautiful, beautiful web-based documentation, but isn't there anything ugly I can read? You know how I like ugly.
So, were you not just listening when I said everybody should use ACL2 doc? Because ACL2 doc has been improved, various fixes, a new command shift tab or back tab that goes backwards just like tab goes forward to the next link. ACL2 doc is great. And I guess I put a demo on the web, but I forget. I meant to make notes of where that is, but Ask Eric Smith, he knows, or ask me later. Anyhow, yeah, it's been improved in all sorts of ways. There's some error that would happen for people who don't have the CL package loaded in their Emacs that I now avoid. You don't get a certain warning about the thing being big and so on. There's a certain infinite loop that was there when you put ACL2 doc on some platform. So it's quite robust now. I actually use ACL2 doc all the time. And, I find it very useful. I find it useful because the most useful thing I find is searching the documentation. I'll be looking, remember there's a certain phrase and I'll be looking for it. And sometimes I know that it's under a certain topic, and you can actually search under a given topic through the body of the documentation to find what you're looking for. You can even do a regular expression search, so if you don't know the exact. Anyhow, I'm sorry. I get kind of emotional about ACL2.
I want to be able to run calls of a function even when it is designed using quantifiers.
Oh, well, by coincidence, Dave Breed mentioned this in his talk. I think it was Dave. No, it wasn't. It was Alessandro. Somebody in here, God, I don't know, mentioned it, but I guess it was in version 8.1, so give me a second. No, 8.1. Who gave the talk that mentioned, was it you, Dave? Or was it you, Alessandro? Mentioning constraining.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, it was in one of your, not your What's News talk, it was one of your talks. Okay, no, but who knows? It's been almost 2 days. Anyhow, the point is somebody has made use of this, which is really a point I want to make overall. A lot of these things, almost all of them, especially if they're new features or changes to existing features, typically come from some user, okay? It's not like proactively Jay or I goes, oh, we should add this feature. I mean, sometimes, like with apply, it's like that, but most of the time it's in response. So somebody had wanted to be able to use def attach to attach an executable function to a function introduced with defun.sk. And the problem is defun.sk, if you look at how it macro expands, actually introduces a regular defun. And then there's a def choose for something else and so on. But if you want the actual function to be attachable, it has to be constrained, not defined. And so you can give this :constrain argument to tell it, I want a constrained function. And then you can attach to it, which means you can run it.
I miss checksums.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Who doesn't? The good news is, so we got rid of checksums as the default way to kind of the default thing to store in a certificate file to, kind of validate that you have the most recent version of the book that was actually certified, or sorry, I didn't say that very well, but that the certificate really corresponds to the book on your file system. But that turned out to be really kind of slow, especially I think for some of those giant Centaur things. So we switched over by default so that the checksum, the certificate file, stores the file length and the file write date. But some people, like Holly here, really like checksums. So fortunately, we actually sped up checksum computation a little bit. I guess it's somewhat tail recursive now, so we avoid a stack overflow. And anyhow, it works a little faster than it did. So, if you want to give it another try because you have, some of these security conscious people that you ship, evaluators you ship things to, and you think they'd prefer a checksum, you can do that.
I hate having to put backslashes in strings within strings.
Yeah, don't we all? But fortunately, Saul so this is a little different than most acknowledgments. This is actually Saul did the enhancement. He sent me the code and said, would you put this in? So it's his fancy string reader. It accepts a string. Okay, I can't really describe it, so I'm going to just click on it. So here's an example. So all you have to do is type sharp, curly brace, open, double quote, double quote, double quote. And then at the end, you put 3 double quotes and a curly brace close, and everything in between is taken literally, which isn't that interesting in this example, but look at this example. There's sorry, this cursor's in the way. Get out of there. Here you see that this double quote isn't escaped. Normally you'd have to put a backslash in front of it. So you can just lay down a string and not worry about it as long as you have this at the beginning and this at the end, and you don't just happen to use a curly brace with 3 string quotes.
I actually contributed that feature, but I contributed a feature that lets you put the closing string
double quote, close brace in there escaped so that can actually occur.
Oh, you didn't write the whole thing?
No, that was Jared, I think.
Oh,
That was a while ago.
oh. Okay, well, I'm sorry I screwed up the credit on that one. Thanks for correcting the record. I'll try to remember to correct it here. So, I knew I didn't write it.
Yeah.
I don't have that much
Me
imagination.
neither, I didn't write it.
You didn't write it either. Okay, so Jared wrote it, Saul fixed it so you can, what can you embed in the middle of it?
What it says there, actually, so that's
Oh.
correct. Except it's a string with 3 string quotes followed by a closing curly brace as part of the actual string. So that's the enhancement.
Oh, I just
There's
can't
some way
read
to
it.
escape it. So,
Right.
yeah, like you put a backslash before the curly brace, and then it's not a real closing triple quote curly brace. But it prints as a triple quote curly brace.
Okay.
Definitely
So somehow this must have come up. You had something that actually had this kind of stuff
yeah,
in
it's because
it.
I wanted to talk about the fancy string reader in a dot topic.
Okay, so moral of the story, don't document your, no.
I hate how I get raw Lisp errors when I do formatted printing.
Well, yeah, we all do, but it's not as bad. It's actually been made a lot clean. So many enhancements have been made to the format functions. The guards have been strengthened. There's some runtime checks in case you're not doing guard verification. There's some cases where you give an ill-formed call and you don't get, anyhow, I'll just let people read it because obviously I can't read, but you're going to find that a lot of this problems with raw Lisp errors has gone away. And the guards are much better and so on. So anyhow, that's all I have to say about that.
It seems dumb that I can't move ACL2 executables.
Yeah, you're so picky, but there are cases, this happened at Kestrel, where they wanted to ship an executable to somebody and there was a path name, an absolute path name written out when you use save exec, and so they couldn't just send it to their customer because it wasn't quite the same absolute path name. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but I think it was something like that. And so now we use a relative path name. As I recall, it's dynamically computed. And we had an initial implementation and shared it with Saul, and he said, well, maybe you could do this instead. So again, I'm not going to read all this, but I'll just say, if you've been nervous about sending a saved underscore ACL2 to somebody because of the path name in it, now that path name is a relative path name typically, or it's dynamically computed, so you can do it.
Well, so far we've been talking about all this little nitpicky stuff that doesn't really have much to do with actual automated reasoning. Don't you do anything interesting?
I try not to, but yeah. So here's an interesting thing, and there's a story here. So Eric Smith, where are you, Eric? Okay, there's Eric. So Eric,
I was going to slip Holly a note about this if she didn't ask.
well, no, because everybody loves this. She knows about it. Of course she'll ask. Anyhow, I guess we knew you wouldn't have asked. But yeah, Eric had this idea, and to be fair to me, Eric has worked, okay? And the reason Eric has worked is that he has put a lot of effort into an amazing tool called Axe that does lifting, you know, sort of like CodeWalker does lifting, I guess, but it's really an amazing thing, and it has a rewriter in it and all sorts of stuff. But it's based on DAGs, right? And it's directed acyclic graphs for terms. And so things don't explode the way they do in ACL2. And it's important to pay attention to that when you have these gigantic terms from crypto and stuff. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
And so Eric was wondering if he could, you know, in his, like I say, warped point of view, take some of that insight and help make ACL2 faster. So Eric said, what, you know, so he knew the following, and I'll tell you all in case you don't know it. When you write a rewrite rule with a let or a let star or a b star, what ACL2 does is it parses it, because after all, a rewrite rule is hypotheses imply left-hand side equals right-hand side, or equivalent to right-hand side. So there are only 4 components, really, to a rewrite rule: the hypothesis, the left-hand side, the equivalence relation, and the right-hand side. And if you put a b star around the whole thing, then syntactically it doesn't have that form. So you have to beta reduce. You have to substitute formals for actuals in the lambdas. And if you completely beta reduce, then you lose all the sharing. But Eric's point was, well, suppose he has a rewrite rule that's like f of x equals let y be something in something. He doesn't want to expand that let that's on the right-hand side. You don't have to expand it for purposes of parsing the rewrite rule into a left and right-hand side. Why not leave that let alone? And I think my reaction was, yeah, I guess that's an okay idea, but I can't believe it would really help much, so I got better things to do. But you kept on it, and you were right. Eric was right. He reported, what, didn't you say something sped up like by a factor of 4?
Yeah, second order of magnitude.
The order of magnitude. So now, let expressions on the right-hand side are left alone. We only kind of expand away lets till we get to the right-hand side and then we stop.
Let's do 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay.
Hey, Matt.
So,
Matt, so is that just, presumably that's just how they're stored in the ACL2 world?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
but the real point of this story is that browbeating you works. Thanks, Eric.
Like you didn't already know that.
So, do you have anything new for a power user like me?
Well, okay, so there are some advanced features involving def attach, but since we're short on time, I won't say much about them. But for those of you who want to start like micromanaging the prover, and sometimes there are really good reasons to do that. In fact, the Kestrel folks here have a reason, right? We have this apt, or they have this apt tool suite that's trying to transform definitions into other definitions. And when you do that, you want real control over what's going on. And in particular, the simplify tool that we reported on last year simplifies a definition to a new form, but we want to preserve structure. And to do that, we want to avoid certain things. But also, there was another transformation, I think it was Eric's, that didn't like this heuristic, which substitutes terms for variables in a conjecture. So anyhow, there are 3 heuristics in ACL2 here that you can control using def attach. And you don't even have to know what def attach is. Just read this documentation, and you can just, any user can do this and change the behavior of the prover, make it more aggressive on computing types when you go into an if term, or, well, it's not really worth going into.
Weren't there a couple of more things you wanted to tell me about raw Lisp errors doing formatted printing?
Oh yeah, I guess there was. So here, we have FMX-CW and FMX-Bang-CW, and they're just like CW and CW-Bang. But the difference is they're well guarded. So they're really nice to use, and you get really, really nice guard violations every time when you use them. CW at least doesn't give as many raw Lisp errors, but these guys actually have good guards.
So how can I stop getting so many in-theory events? Like when I do the same defund D twice, the second isn't completely redundant.
You can use set in theory redundant OKP, and then in theory events will be redundant. So when you do a defund D twice, everything will be redundant. Today, if you just say defund D, the in theory part is done again, which you don't want maybe. We could have just made that the default, but there's a cost to checking redundancy, so you have to actually evaluate set in theory redundant OKP to get this behavior.
I do really big stuff, so print GB is really slow.
Well, we made some improvements to wormholes, and that made print GB faster. Now we're rushing it. Next question.
Linear rules are, of course, great for inequality reasoning, so why can't I monitor them?
You can. Next question. We fixed it.
I thought you already fixed puff.
Yeah, we did, but we fixed it some more. Something more local hands. Now it's better. That should be fine now.
One more thing. Sometimes raw Lisp error messages are really obscure.
Yeah, and they still are, but sometimes they're a little better than they used to be. So in CCL only, CCL fortunately kind of squirrels away a little bit of information about why this raw Lisp error occurred. It might always be of the form, you know, the caller was this. And sometimes just knowing the caller, which function way deep down is the one that had the problem, can help you. So we now save that information from CCL, if you're using CCL, and print it out. So when you see the bunch of stars, you know, and it says raw Lisp error or whatever, look some more, and if you're using CCL, it'll say caller was this or something like that. So just keep an eye out for that. It might be helpful.
Well, I'll just save these 10 other questions for home later tonight, so I'm off. Bye, sweetie. Don't get too involved here and forget to come home.
Actually, I'm going to walk you out. Hold on.
Are there any questions?
Yeah.